All right, everybody, welcome back to the Protein and Purpose podcast. This is episode 8. I am here with my man, Cody Parks. Um, I'm going to do a brief introduction of Cody and then let him tell you a little bit about himself. But I met Cody, well, coincidentally, I got I don't know if you saw it, I texted it
You
to you,
just sent it to me, yeah.
Facebook memory that it's 15 years officially of Facebook friendship today. So we probably met maybe, I don't know, a week or two before that. But we met when I was managing a gym, a personal training department in Indianapolis, Indiana. Through all the time that I worked in corporate fitness, Cody stands out as one of the most impressive guys I've ever worked with. How old were you when you started there?
Oh boy, I was pretty fresh out of college, so early 20s, about as green as you can get. I
Right.
actually, fun fact, I um, did like an internship there under the infamous Mike Shabbat. So
Yeah. Shout out to Mike. Um,
yeah,
another great guy I got to work with. But the thing that was most impressive about you is because you were so young, the just the spirit, the attitude, the desire to grow and get better at everything. And I remember we had anytime I've excelled in my life, it's because I pulled together like just a group of guys, a group of people who were interested in growing and getting better. And it's usually senior people, right? It just usually is. And you were one of the few exceptions when there was a younger person in the group, and you would speak up more than anybody in the group. And there was a moment I remember. The theme of the large theme of this today's podcast is going to be about fatherhood, because I remember you always talking about your dad and the impact he had on you. And there was one, and we talked about this offline. There was one conversation where you said, just my dad always told me an overarching theme was, if you're going to put your name on something, make sure it deserves your name. Make sure you give it your best effort. I don't remember exactly how you worded it, but it
yeah,
was, I was just like, that's awesome. It made me think of my grandfather. And I reached out to you initially to ask you, what were the traits, habits, recommendations you would give to a dad so that his son speaks about him like that? Because that's how I want
mm,
my both my kids to talk about me. But it was a lot about manhood you talked about with your dad. So
yeah,
um, this interview is a chance to open that up for any dads out there who are looking to be that for their kids.
yeah.
So that is my introduction. Anything you want to add there? Tell about you, who you are, what you do now. You have 3 kids now, right?
Correct, I do. Yeah. So I mean, first of all,
And
just
let me, if I
yeah, go.
can, take any credit, because I hired your wife.
That is,
So
there's all kinds of fun facts buried in this conversation.
it's
That's
true.
amazing. Yeah, I mean, so first of all, Brandon, thank you for having me, and just appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion, share perspective. When you called me, and uh, my wheels started turning, thinking about it, and just reliving memories and characteristics that really stood out to me. I was obviously just really excited to kind of dig into all of this. So, um, on that same note, I'm still in Indiana, right? And so I've had the opportunity to kind of watch you from afar, thanks to, in large part, social media, but just excited about what I've seen you doing and how you've impacted men around you, myself included, and just kind of excited to be a part of that. Um, so yeah, so the I guess the story that you're specifically referencing, and it goes back to a specific moment that I fortunately and unfortunately vividly remember. So it wasn't even necessarily like certainly was not my proudest moment at all. Um, I was in 6th grade. Um, it was the beginning of my 6th grade year, and I know that because I was just getting into my career, for lack of a better term, with cross country or distance running, and um, I don't remember specifically like what caused me to kind of make some bad decisions necessarily, but um, nevertheless, I ended up at a point where I received a failing grade, my first one that I've ever had, and I historically had been an all A's and B's student, um, and that resulted in a temporary suspension from being allowed to compete and some
Was this
pretty
high school or
difficult.
college?
This was actually middle school. I was in sixth
Okay.
grade. Yeah. So, and then, some pretty serious conversations with my parents at that point, right? Like, you know, I guess you call it like a come to Jesus conversation of what are we doing, right? Um, the funny part about that was I think it was really more just laziness more than anything that got me in that situation because if I recall correctly, it was really just a lot of missing assignments. Not really critical to the story, but after I got all that stuff turned in, and even with the reductions for being late, I was back up to like a B. Like I knew I was a smart kid, I guess was maybe the point of that, but it was just out of laziness. But through that and with some of those conversations that I had specifically with my dad, I don't know why this stuck with me the way that it did, but what he said to me was, if your name is going to be on the top of it, it better be your best effort. It's the way that we raised you, right? And so I just started to apply that, obviously, to that class and to school in general. But every time I ran a race, my name was next to it. Every time I turned in a resume for a job, my name was on the top of it. Like I always kind of saw my name and um, just wanted to make sure it was my best effort. And that was something that he had instilled in me through that conversation, but also conversations that we had over the years. Right? It was kind of an overarching theme that seemed to come up quite a bit. Right? It was just giving your best effort. So
Yeah.
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 Uh,
I mean, that's. Go ahead.
well, and I was just going to add to that. So like when you had kind of brought all this up, and I start thinking back through that story specifically, but also just the other memories that I had of my dad. Like one of the things that really stuck out to me, um, a characteristic of his was just his relentless work ethic. That was something that really rubbed off on me. I also was lucky enough to have a relationship with both of my grandfathers before they passed. And then even now, my father-in-law, in having the opportunity to learn from him, I've just seen that example displayed through each of them in a really powerful way. Um, you know, my dad, one of the memories or one of the memories I have of him is just consistently waking up early before the sun would even come up to go accomplish whatever responsibilities he had for that day. And it was,
Hmm.
I know he didn't want to do that every single day. I guarantee it, but he did it anyway. I mean, without fail, he was up getting stuff done. And so that was just really powerful for me as I've gotten older.
So think about you now, right? It's not. He didn't want to do that, but he
Yeah,
wanted he wanted the results of what those actions would yield,
absolutely.
right? Yeah, I think about my dad wasn't that example, right? I didn't have that, but at age 11, I ended up living with my grandparents, and my grandfather was that example. Up at
Mm,
like 4 every day with a task list to knock out, maintenance on the house. You know, he was retired, but at that point, um, and you know, things to do, and he would pitch a list of things for me to do, and yeah, it was a stark contrast between the
Yeah.
two. But
And I
and he wasn't
think,
the only one. He was very fortunate enough to have other male role models that
yeah.
yeah. I'm sorry. Go
And
ahead.
no, and I think part of that is, or I guess part of what I've taken out of that is that hard work isn't only about effort, right? It's also about consistency. It's about taking pride in what you do, like no matter the task, right? And it's just um, him showing up every single day, right, to get it all done. So,
It's who you become as a result of it. Because
mm,
effort doesn't equal outcome, right? It
100%.
it's you won't always get focused effort can this is a subject we were talking about at Bible study this past week. uh, the pastor actually put up on the board effort and equal sign outcome, and he said, we have a personal trainer here, what do you think about this, expecting me to be like, yeah, effort equals outcome. It was like, no, intentional effort or focused effort can affect the outcome, but it's who you become through it. And a lot of times it's a learning process, and you learn your efforts aren't yielding the result. It's important to learn that. It's a motto I throw at my kids a lot, and I need to learn is fail faster, because
Mm.
it you learn things in that failure. Hey, we you've said before that I we haven't talked about this. I don't know where your dad was with faith, but you said before that faith is your biggest influence in your decisions to be an intentional father. How has that faith been tested or strengthened through your journey?
How has that faith been strengthened or tested? I mean, I guess to start, I mean, when you're, for me, when my now oldest daughter first entered the world, um, something changes in you, right?
Yeah.
I had this really drastic realization that I was no longer the most important person in my life, and I think that's a good lesson to learn anyway in general. But it was through her story that really became a reality for me. Um, and our story through that whole process is probably a little different than most, or at least some. Um, like as young parents, we were thrust into a pretty wild situation with our first daughter, Everly, who is she'll be 10 in December now. But it was um, it's wild.
That's crazy.
um, but yeah, I mean it was just you kind of recognize in those moments that like more than ever, or more than I ever had before that point. Just kind of started to like realize like as humans how fragile life is, how in certain moments we really can be like pretty helpless, um, and I think that's where my faith really took a turn and started to strengthen. Um, I think we were in a situation where based on our own abilities, we felt really helpless. I think up until that point, you could kind of get by through like self reliance. You could get by on hard work, and we were in a situation where we were genuinely desperate for God's help, and just leaned into Him as our Lord, as the Creator of the earth, um, and everything that He provides for us. So and I can, if you want, I can kind of dig into that story a little
Yeah.
bit if you want.
If you don't mind, please do.
Yeah. I mean, so um, at our 20-week appointment,
Yeah.
um, that's, kind of one of the big milestone appointments where they're measuring everything, right? They're measuring the arms and the legs, and they measure the head. And um, we were told that Everly had a significant case of hydrocephalus. So if you're not familiar with hydrocephalus, um, all brains have a kind of a space where we have this. I hope I'm getting the terminology right, but it's like cerebral, like spinal fluid that is in these ventricles, but that normally that fluid is like regulated. Um, and what we were told at the time was that that fluid was not regulating and that it was slowly increasing, right? And so um, we kind of went through multiple follow-ups. We worked on trying to get second opinions, and the only thing that those did was basically confirm her diagnosis. We were kind of prepped for expect a worst case scenario, and if we're lucky, it might not be. It might be a little bit more mild than what we're expecting. We were even advised at least one point to terminate the pregnancy. And so we kind of, uh, my wife and I kind of had like an eye to eye moment with each other of like, where do we stand on this? Like we have to decide in this moment what we believe. And I'm grateful that we were on the same page and that neither of us really felt worthy of like making that decision. Like it just wasn't our call to make on her life.
Yeah.
So we just chose to trust whatever God had planned for us and like truly follow the example that we saw Jesus set for us in when he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, just before he was arrested and then crucified. Right, so um, he prayed and said, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. Not your will, but or not my will, but your will be done."
Your
Right.
will be done.
So, um, following that model, right, we prayed really boldly, really specifically for her to be healed. Um, of course, we were hoping for a different outcome than what we had been told, but at the same time, in that prayer, um, just fully surrendered to His will, right? So, um, just trusting whatever plan He had for us as a family. Um, Miraculously, Everly was born without hydrocephalus, like at all. Um, you know, in a similar way to where we all have noses and they're different sizes and different shapes. We all have ventricles in our brain, and hers are just a little bit different shape and size. Um, if you if you spend time with Everly, she is incredibly intelligent, um, probably one of the most emotionally mature humans I've ever met, um, and just really tenderhearted. Um, it was for us, it was a situation where the doctors came in and got to tell us that they were wrong and um, that like everything had self-regulated. And yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, man. Thank you, Cody, so much for sharing that,
Yeah.
man. That's just an absolutely incredible story. Uh,
Yeah.
so many things you
She,
said there. I know dads can relate to. Parents. I You talked about the moment you realize you're not the most important person in your life. You know, um, the way you know it, it's a two-way street because you would step in front of a car for them, absolutely,
yeah.
without question, right? Your heart is outside of your body, and you want to protect it, but you have to protect its future as well. You have to build it into the person that can protect themselves. Yeah, man. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
just
She's,
the miracle of just the diagnosis was completely wrong. And thank God you
It
guys
was,
were strong enough to. When you talk about her emotional maturity, I mean, if there is a genetic predisposition for that, you and Amanda come together to
mm,
pass that along, because I mean, that's exactly the traits I saw in you when we first started working together, man. So
yeah,
and her as well, yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Um, very welcome. I just such a powerful story. I'm trying to think about where to go from there. Uh, yeah, we had a similar. I mean, when Freya was 3 months old, went into the hospital with RSV, and just trouble breathing, and she has the treatments were miserable for her. She has no concept of what's going on. I remember her screaming, and
Yeah,
it's Gavin had last. It hasn't even been a year yet. He was in the hospital for a procedure that was supposed to be 20 minutes, and ended up being almost 3 hours, and they couldn't tell us anything. And that powerless feeling,
mm,
oh, it is the worst. And to deal with that before they're even born is, uh, again, it's I know every parent has been there, and but it is such fatherhood, parenthood is such a crash course in theology, because you have this thing that comes from you in your image, and you want it, you want the best for it,
yeah,
but it won't listen to you. It won't take your advice, and you have to let it, within reason, learn and make its own mistakes. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Again, thank you for sharing that, man.
Yeah.
You mentioned pride in our earlier conversation, in our
Mhm.
email, being one of the biggest challenges in fatherhood. Can you give an example of when pride got in the way, and how you course corrected it, and any advice you would give to any parents out there who may struggle with that themselves?
Yeah, man. Um, I mean, I definitely recognized it in myself first, right? Like it's when it's going back to that moment when you're like realizing you're not the most important person in the world. And then you kind of have that almost a guilt of like, wow, ever thinking that I was the most important person in, at least in my life, right? And I think we all have that, right? So then you just start to become more aware of that and what that looks like. You start observing it in other people, different situations. And so I think generally speaking, humans are selfish and prideful by nature, at least to some degree. I think, we probably all have varying degrees of that. And it's to your point earlier, like it's one of the big things that you end up having to kind of help your kids understand as they grow up. Um, while at the same time you're still dealing with that in yourself, and you're trying to grow through that in your own mind. Um, it's where a lot of issues and conflict that we ever deal with originate from. Um, and so, like for example, I've noticed that like how I respond when my kids act a certain way, um, is kind of comes through or comes out of that pride, right? So like I react to
Yeah,
essentially my lack of control over a situation and thinking that I ever really even had much control to begin with. Um, I think practically, like how have I overcome that? I disclaimer: I certainly don't have everything figured out. Right? I think that should be made really clear. But um, I think it's important to get into a habit of pausing before you react to something, and maybe react is one of the key words there. I think when we react to situations where our body is in that like fight or flight kind of mode, um, that can be appropriate in certain situations, right? But rarely for day to day interactions with your kids is that an appropriate place to be acting out of, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
something wild happens, fight or flight is part of why the human race has even survived, right? But it's you got to keep yourself out of that cycle. So I think that's one of the best places to start is literally just taking 5 seconds, take a deep breath if you have to. I mean, there's a couple of different ways you could practically go through that, but I think when you pause, you take a moment to kind of get yourself out of that cycle and almost kind of hijack your way out of it so that you're more thoughtful in your response, right?
Yeah, I I remember when Gavin was first born. So I talked about my grandfather, and you know, uh, he was like a when I first moved in with them, he was like a superhero to me,
Mm.
right? I just I remember that, and then as I got older and I was getting ready to leave for the Marines, um, I remember like a couple people telling me about, well, just but doing their best to besmirch his name, right? When he was younger, he did this, and when he was younger, he did this, and it found out like he's a pretty wild guy at a time, right? But then, as I remember as I got older, like he would even tell me stories, and I think an important part of parenting and leadership in any role is being willing to acknowledge you're a hypocrite, right?
Yeah.
Don't do what I did, right? Or like even in the moment when my wife and I talk about this all the time. When I mess up, if I yell at the kids, I've got to go back and be like, "Hey, shouldn't have yelled. I made a mistake," and not like, "But you did this," right? Not looking to justify it, but I made a mistake. I yelled. Sorry about that. Now, let's fix the whatever situation arose,
Yeah.
right? Um, there was something else you said. I think it's important to model self care as well, right? Uh, I we haven't talked about this, but there was something you said where when I would talking about our upbringing, I want my kids to have confidence and good self esteem, and it's when I was 11, I went into I was submitted to a ward for troubled teens. And then while in there, I'm in there with crazy like 15, 16, 17 year olds, which was scary when you're 11. And I didn't want to come out of my room because of that. I'm getting to a point here, I promise. There was I had to be put in solitary confinement, right? And that was the
Hmm.
latest science showed this is what was proper for 11-year-olds. And I joked for decades, man. I joked about it. I was like, you know, those it was I was a rambunctious 11-year-old. That's what it took to hold me. And and I would say, oh, those doctors were just doing their jobs, whatever. But then in a conversation one time, somebody said, and this was when Gavin was like 2. Okay, now Gavin's going to be 11 years old. What happens when somebody wants to put him in a box, right? And like for even asking the question, I wanted to hurt that person, right? And so I had to come to this realization that we talked about wanting to protect them, but then making sure we teach them largely by example that they're worthy of protecting themselves. I had to recognize I was making excuses for these people that abused me, right? And I was worthy of that protection that for whatever reason I wasn't getting at that point.
Yeah.
So how do you how do you model that while you're not the most important person in the world because you're taking care of them, you are important enough to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Not and we can of course talk about health fitness, right? But I'm talking about like just mental health as well,
Yeah.
spiritual health.
Well, I think there's a couple things there. Um, one is just how important it is to lead by example. Um, I think as simply as you can put it is, and this might seem obvious, but like your kids are watching, right? And living with them and watching them grow up, and then you start to recognize yourself in a lot of what they do or the way they act. Um, that becomes more real to you, right? Because you're seeing it play out right in front of you. Um, yeah, that I think that's a big piece of it. Um,
Yeah, I don't understate that your kids are watching. Like you said, this might seem obvious, but I think it's obvious in retrospect. But in the moment, we can forget that. You know, that's I try to like part of my morning routine um, is reminding myself that I want you know my daughter is going to be she's looking at me for how a woman should be treated when I talk to my wife, right? And when I exist with my wife, right? And when I
hmm,
talk to her and treat her, right? And my son is watching that, and vice versa. They're both seeing how a woman should you know treat and be treated by her husband, and how that relationship works. Um, yeah, and it's yeah. So how do you balance with that, with the idea of building self worth and then building self confidence, building. I don't like this idea of, maybe you have feedback in this because I've had a few times people say, well, don't you want your daughter to be strong, independent woman? And no, I don't want her to be alone. I want her to be a strong, dependable person and find a strong, dependable mate. So in that, how do you balance like discipline and love in the household?
how do I balance discipline and love? Um, I think two things. One is focusing on their character more than their behaviors. Um, so as I'm talking to them, interacting with them, um, it's for me, and it's less about the behaviors, but it's about setting that foundation early. Uh, so investing early, right, and looking at it from that perspective, right? It's something that is going to pay off in the future more so than just trying to correct a behavior in the moment. I think there's a time for that, right? Like especially situations where like maybe they're putting themselves in danger, right? You've got to quickly correct that behavior, obviously. Um, but then uh, you know, following up with that and addressing the character or the reason for the behavior behind that. So um, I I heard a sermon earlier this year, and this really struck me. And this will kind of go back to leading by example, but it was it was a sermon on Joshua 24:15 that says, um, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable, choose for yourself today whether you'll serve or whom you'll serve." So it's whether you'll, and I think it says, well, whether you'll serve the gods of your ancestors who live beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, um, in whose land you're living. And then it ends with, but as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And so I was struck in that sermon, and just convicted of like it starts with you, right? Like uh, if there's unrest in your household, if it's not a peaceful place for you and your family, the best way to fix it is to start with yourself. Your wife will follow you, your kids will follow you and follow your wife. Um, Though, like over time, they're going to learn by your example. Um, and I think they'll even learn from your imperfection, especially like when you're willing and able to have those conversations with them. So one of the ways that I'm so blessed by Everly's emotional intelligence, I feel like it gives me space it makes it easier for me to um, confess some of that stuff to her and just be like really raw and honest and be like, listen, I'm a human like you are. I'm trying to figure this out like you are. I'm not perfect, nor are you going to be perfect. Like we're going to make mistakes, but it's less about our behavior. It's more about our character. It's how we respond to those mistakes. Um, and so she's given me the grace to kind of learn how to do that a little bit more effectively with her sister and her brother. Um, I think the second part of that is um, when I think about like balancing discipline and love in that household, um, is I think that not not operating or not disciplining uh, out of out of fear, or getting them to not having them behave based on fear, right? So again, it's kind of going back more to that character. But I think what you're teaching your kids, or what I would love to teach my kids or continue to teach them, is um, that their values and their morals and their principles are really what's important. And when you're operating from that foundation, rather than operating based on fear, that's certainly a better environment for them to be in. Um, they're rooted in their identity and who they are, right? The truth of who they are, rather than um, rather than just being afraid of not acting a certain way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's more about uh, confidence in themselves or validation, self validation, rather than knowing they've done the work to create their they can create their own peace, right? So you talked about not having peace in the household, and but instead of putting that on someone else, right? Even if it is the your wife or your children, creating it versus finding it, right? And I think that kind of goes along with the overarching theme you're talking about of investing, right? People love, or a lot of times people talk about everything they sacrifice. Well, sacrifice just it, so often I think we need to go back in the etymology of these words and find out where they actually come from. And people think
Absolutely.
about sacrifice as just giving things up,
Yeah.
but sacrifice is supposed to be a synonym to investing, right? You're delayed
Yes.
gratification. You're giving
Yeah.
up something in the short term to get more in the long term,
Yeah.
right? And so and that's where like finding is versus creating or building for yourself, creating your own peace versus finding peace. Like I have to go somewhere else to get it. No, I can create it right here. I have everything I need. I am and have everything I need. And that's kind of what I took away from what you were saying there. Is that along the same lines?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and again, like I think it starts with you and focusing on um, creating, like you said, creating that within yourself. I actually would probably go so far as to say is finding that in a spiritual relationship with our Creator, right? Um, uh,
Yeah.
Truly. Loving God more than you love your wife or your kids. And I think that can be, it's certainly countercultural. But I think that creates, that is the source of peace. At least it has been for me. Um, Something that is steadfast, doesn't change, right? Like if my peace is in, frankly, anything of this world, but if my peace is in my wife and I find my peace in her and her alone, uh, she's amazing, but she will fail at some point, just as I certainly will fail and have failed for her, right? So, my prayer is that I am not her source of peace. Um, I I think what happens when that picture looks the way it's supposed to look, and this isn't not like a novel idea. This isn't anything that I've come up with, but you look at a triangle, the strongest geometric shape that there is, and when you put God at the top, and you have a husband and wife, and their eyes are pointed to the top, as you move closer in relationship, as you know your creator better, as you find that peace in him, it pulls these 2 points closer together, and
Closer together. Yeah.
you'll actually start to find that your house just is a more peaceful place, right? It almost becomes less about focusing on the peace and focusing more on the creator, and he gives you that peace. Um, so it's really important to prioritize those correctly, and to check yourself and make sure that you are. Um, and man, again, I don't have everything figured out, but I think anytime we've had that posture, anytime we've oriented ourselves in that way, um, man, it's a better place to be, right? Our relationship is better. Our relationship with our kids are better. Again, they're watching. They feel it. They see it. To your point, they see you loving your wife and treating her correctly, honoring her, celebrating her. They see you praying together. They see you praying for each other. They see you dating each other. Like there's just so many things that kind
Yeah.
of pour out of that, and I think you've got to have that organized the right way.
Yeah. That's, you reminded me of, there's a few weeks ago now, uh, we, you know, I post on social media in my story all the time, just date your spouse. Like Tara and I have regular date
Mm,
nights.
yeah,
And yeah, my son was like, why do you and mommy go on dates? Like, because we love each other. We love hanging out.
yeah,
It's, and I, he didn't get it, but I was like, it's why you're here. So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So, um, yeah, I think eventually yeah, at some point they'll understand that, but
yeah.
it's
But
just
but
a
even now, I mean,
funny thing.
you're by investing in your relationship with your wife, you're also simultaneously investing in your son's relationship with you guys as his parents, but also investing in his future relationships.
Yeah.
He's watching you. He's learning how you what's the right way to treat a significant other, a spouse. Like what does that look like? And he's sitting there watching it play out in real time. Um, it's really powerful. It's
Yeah.
really powerful.
Yeah, man.
So
Thanks. I agree.
yeah,
That's yeah, man, some great points you're bringing up there. All right, let's talk about principles and habits. Uh, presence over perfection is something you had told me is like a core
yeah,
principle for you. I love that. Um, I talk about when I talk to clients in the health and fitness space, and they'll talk about their goals, and they're often aesthetic. I tell them, okay, you you think you want that aesthetic goal. What you want is the presence you think that aesthetic goal is going to bring, right? So I try to get them to talk about the presence they want to hold. But tell me more about like what that means to you and how you model that for your kids.
yeah. that's one of the big things that I really credit my dad for. Um, I my most fond memories of him, uh, or maybe the ones that come to mind first, aren't necessarily like the biggest or most special moments, um, but it was a lot of those like one-on-one moments, just spending time with each other. And I think what I've come to realize is how special that is for someone when they're really little. How it makes them feel seen. They have that special feeling. Um, it's really it's interesting. So this will end up actually being like a really practical thing. But so my son Jameson is 4. And I think probably like most boys, especially like in that toddler phase of their lives, like they can really struggle with um, like dealing with their emotions, and they're kind of learning their
Yeah.
hormones and things like that. Like they get upset really easy, and like the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And when you're 4, sometimes it's like so and so
Yeah.
took my candy or whatever, right? Like that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you. But
My
so
candy cane broke.
yeah, yeah, and they lose it, right? So I heard this on a podcast a while back, and it just really stuck with me. So in that conversation, they were discussing, um, the topic of that podcast was what it looks like specifically through like a biblical lens of what it means to act like a man. And their conversation in the middle of that moved to like raising boys, and specifically one of the guys that was in that conversation was talking about processing their emotions, or the ability or the lack thereof, especially when he was little, how he really struggled with that. And he made a comment that, I mean, there was a lot of really good stuff in that conversation, but he made a comment that I took some notes on. And um, it was more so like posed as a question. He goes, I wonder what it would have looked like if I was just hugged more as a child, um, and just allowed or given that space to like process my emotions a little bit more safely, because he was almost like encouraged or celebrated to act out aggressively. And when he did that, he was met in return with aggression or anger. Admittedly, I've caught myself doing that, right? Like, again, when you're not in control of that situation and you can feel that frustration, right? Your kid starts acting a little crazy, and you can feel that like your face turns red.
Yeah.
Um, and so you kind of meet their anger with a little bit of anger yourself, of like trying to correct the behavior, right? Um, so I've started practicing this with my son, and in those moments, like rather than being angry or aggressive with him in return, um, you pause, right? And just being present and calm with him in response rather than the alternative. Um, and so I've really specifically just been like, I mean, he's small enough. I just wrap my arms around him really gently and just hold him. Like I'm not restraining him, but just hugging him and allowing him the opportunity to breathe and calm down, and keeping myself calm. Um, and it's resulted in him progressively, his outbursts aren't quite as dramatic. His outbursts aren't quite as frequent. Um, he's he's actually like managing. It's also easier for him to manage his outbursts. Like he's kind of cooling down a little quicker. Um,
Yeah.
he even starts to request hugs when he can feel himself getting that. It's happened a couple times in the past week where he gets upset, and he'll turn and just say, "Daddy, can I have a hug?" or "Daddy, I need a hug." And like he's starting to recognize that feeling, and knows that like there's another way that I can deal with this rather than kicking or stomping my feet or crying, getting upset. Right? Like he feels and recognizes those emotions on his
Yeah.
own. It's
That's
been incredible.
so we had with Gavin, we had to do uh we did very similar, right? Um, because you're right, like that toddler phase, he's 6 now, just would lose control of his emotion very quickly. And we you talked about candy, and I mentioned candy cane. There were two things that, like, he loves candy canes, which he gets from my wife. I don't like them so much. And balloons, right? And it, balloons came up first. He loved playing with balloons, and it would pop. And the first time it happened, it scared the crap out of him, right? Of course, and just flipped out. And so now my daughter as well. If you ask either of them, what do balloons do? Their answer is going to be they pop. At some point, it could be 30 seconds after you get it. It could be 2 weeks from now. That balloon is going to pop. So enjoy it while you have it. When that loss, difficulty, whatever it is comes, hey, you had your time with that balloon and enjoy it, right? And then at first, we worked on that. The balloons pop. He would come in and he would get a hug. Now the balloon pops and he's like, "What do balloons do, Dad?" I'm like, "They pop." He's like, "I had fun with that balloon." And
Yeah.
with candy canes, it reminded me of the conversation or the old saying, "You can't have your cake and eat it too." Because what's people does, well, what's the point in having cake if I can't eat it? They're completely missing the point of that. You can't have the beautiful ornate cake and eat it, right? Once you eat it, it is less beautiful, right? That's the point of it. You can either enjoy something and have it, or use it, right? It's having a beautiful low mileage car, or getting out there and driving the thing and
Mm.
enjoying the experience of it, right? Memories or you know things hung up on a wall that are never used. And with candy canes, when they would break, he would just lose it. And so I grabbed a candy cane. I was, look, what do candy canes do? They break, and they taste good whether they're broken or not. Balloons pop, candy canes break. So teaching the kids that enjoy what you have. It's all temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, man,
Yeah. It really
that was
is.
great. So let me see here. I mean, you covered a lot in that last one. I tried to write down a couple of things, and I'm going to go back and listen to this again because you're just dropping knowledge bombs, man. Thank you so much for making the time again.
Yeah. Of course.
So something you in the email you said your dad told you. Well, hold on. Yeah, no, this is the one I wanted to get to. You said legacy is more about character than material inheritance. You talked about investing earlier, right? But you talked about investing in yourself. You know, I don't think you said specifically finances, but of course that is there. So,
Yeah.
how do you measure whether you're building uh, not just the material inheritance, but the character inheritance? How do you measure that? How do you know you're passing that character inheritance on to your kids?
Yeah. Man, I love that question. And this, I feel like this has changed for me over the years. Um, I, I've certainly in my life, I started to turn to scripture a lot more. And there's like some specifics for like how that's played out in my life. But um, so Luke 6, there's a parable that Jesus tells. It says, "For no good trees bear bad fruit, and no bad trees bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its fruit." And then it says that figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor grapes picked from bramble bush. Right. So I think, just trying to like break that down. That's probably how I would answer that question. Is based from that scripture. I simply look at their fruit. And so I think a big part of that is like really knowing your kids and spending time with them. And as you're investing in them, as you're learning about who they are, you can kind of start to see some of those things, and you see their growth and the way they change. Like Galatian gives us a really clear list. Like if you're looking for something tangible, Galatian gives us a really clear list of like what fruits are. And so I think just when you're involved in your kids' lives, um, you start to be able to like discern the good fruit in their lives, and then you also start to discern, like staying on the topic of trees and plants, like you start to discern what areas of their lives need to be pruned, what needs to be cut away, what areas in their life do they need to be coached or celebrated or reinforced. You can kind of redirect some of those efforts. Um, I mean, contrastly, um, the material stuff is really measurable, right? Like I can open a bank account and say, like, okay, here's what that quote unquote legacy looks like, and here's the trajectory that it is. Um, the character of my kids um, is a little bit more intimate than that, and I think that's the only way to really measure it is to truly know who they are. Um, yeah,
Man, that's another one. There was a lot you dropped there. I'm thinking about like, Gavin's been recognized at church at 6 years old. Like the pastors made comments about how strong his faith is, which
yeah,
that was not me at 6 years old. That wasn't me at 36 years old.
yeah,
Um, at soccer the other day, they finished the practice. All the teams come together and uh, they 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 do prayer, and he's always raising his hand and wanting at his wrestling practice as well. He's always wanting to pray out, and it's just yeah, it's lets me think I'm doing some things right
yeah,
on the character legacy side for sure, man.
yeah.
Thank you for that there.
I think part of it
Um,
too is like, um, I guess maybe like one of the I guess like one of the principles I guess that I would want to pass down, um, is, or I guess I'm trying to think through this. Like the one of the ways that I would, I guess, maybe help steer them in the right direction is, and this is getting a little specific, but I guess maybe it's an example of one aspect of it is celebrating effort over success. Um, like
Effort over
cel-
outcome.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Celebrating who they are, not just what they do, right? Like their behavior is not necessarily their identity. Um, and like I would kind of think of it as like, um, yeah, you said, say that again.
Effort over outcome.
Effort over outcome.
So
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
so
thinking like identity over performance is kind of the way I was thinking of it.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
probably a better way to put it. It's we approach wins and losses the same way. And there might be a
Yeah.
better way to state wins and losses, but I think you know what I mean. Is if you win, cool. What did you do, and how
Exactly.
can you do it better? How can you make it part of who you are? you didn't, let's say you got the outcome you wanted. Good. Like what contributed? Well, I was lucky that this fell this way. Were you lucky, or did you set yourself up for that, right? Or how do you set yourself up so you're lucky again next time? If you didn't get the outcome you wanted, what did you do that was right? How could you next time you're in that same situation? How can you approach it better? And then how can you make that part of your? I love that you said identity. You've said two words time and again: presence and identity.
Mm.
um, that is like, again, when I talk to people about goals and they want to talk aesthetics, I'm coming back to presence and identity. How do we? And that's what I'm trying to coach my kids, regardless of outcome.
Yeah.
What is your character?
Yeah.
What
So
is your reputation going to be?
it's really interesting. So I saw this actually the other day, and I think I've seen this before because um, it was really familiar to me, but like, um, high fives celebrate effort. And there's these research studies that have been done. I think there's a few of them, but they look at like the psychological effects of a physical gesture of praise, like a high five or a fist bump, rather than just a verbal. And it's like clearly been shown to help kids have a more positive self evaluation of themselves after something, win or lose, and it helps kids to be more persistent in their failures, because you're celebrating the effort that they put in, not just the outcome. And like I've seen this with my kids, they're all doing swim lessons right now, and um, you know, once they, for each kind of level, once they accomplish a certain set of tasks, they get a ribbon, a little card, they graduate to that next level. And it's the message that I've kind of given, certainly you want to celebrate those accomplishments because they've put a lot of effort into it, but I'm reminding them of that effort all along the way and the effort they put in to get there. And on the other side of it, guess what? The effort's still the same, right? You're still trying to get better. And so whether they go to a class where they are handed a ribbon or whether it's just another class, the effort's still the same. And they're celebrated the same for that effort every single
Yeah.
time.
And they're going to look for people that work like that as well, right?
Yeah.
It's you know what it makes me think of? Let me know if this makes sense. This is from the hip. I hope this makes sense. You remember the movie Moneyball?
Mm-hmm.
So it was, not that I'm a fan of baseball, but like baseball's always been about the home runs, right? The big hit. And look what I can do, right? Instead of how do I make small wins and contribute to my team, right? Instead of the big outcome, right? The effort to move a little bit closer, to move a little bit closer, to move a little bit closer. And then of course the home run happens occasionally, but it's the recognition of a little bit of ground taken each time, becoming a little bit better each time instead of just the the occasional big win celebration. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Does that fit what you're talking about?
I think so. Yeah. Well, and like, I mean, I saw it in baseball the other day where, the one team is up 3-0, and they're trying to play in a way where they're not letting the big play happen, and the other team's just chipping away at them. They're butting the ball. The next thing you know, he accidentally hits a batter and he takes a base, and before you know it, the bases are loaded, and it's just that consistent effort across that inning. It wasn't one big
Mm-hmm.
play; it was everybody sacrificing. Because again, like guys are hitting bunts, or they're hitting little chop shots into shallow left field, right? And before you know it, they figured out how to get the bases loaded, and then whether it's another small play or a big home run, that team's in trouble, right? It's they put up 3 runs and it's 3-3 before you know it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a great analogy.
So, in taking the conversation in the other direction, real quick, I'm sure you've been there. I don't know a what's the saying I've been told. Only good parents worry about whether or not they're good parents, right? And it's good parents will sometimes then eventually feel like bad parents, feel like they're failing. So, uh, what's the first step you'd encourage a dad who feels like they're failing to take? I'm sorry, did I lose you?
Nope, I'm still here. It paused for a
Okay.
second, but
Let me ask. I had a notification come up on screen. Let me ask that again. Uh, Many dads feel like they're failing. What's the first step you'd encourage them to take if they feel like they're stuck in that place?
if they're stuck feeling like a failure,
Yeah,
hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think again, you've got to start trying to um, you've got to start with yourself. I think first and foremost, um, and then I think that you start operating from a point where you're overflowing into other people rather than um, rather than running on empty, if that makes sense, right? Like it's kind of
it does.
filling your own bucket to a point where it starts to overflow, and now you're filling everybody else's bucket. I think that's maybe a good place to start. Um, Man, for me, um, I think I've spent a lot of time in my Bible. I spent time trying to make sure that my schedule is balanced and that I'm prioritizing my priorities. Um, yeah, and that's probably a good place to start. Um, I'm
I
trying to
think
think of
that's no, no. It's great. I mean, priorities are because it's going to come back to the basics, right? Spending time. You talked about the core memories. We had a few weeks ago, like we had a big weekend where there's a bunch of things. We were going to events. Um, from the hip, I can't even remember what the big events were, but it was like a lot of fun stuff for the kids, like the pool and this. And then we came home, had lunch, and watched something. Was it Bat Wheels? I don't know. My son just loves Batman. And we finished up. I was like, "Hey, buddy, what was your favorite part of the day?" And he was like, "Sitting here watching this with you." And I was just like, "All right." you
yeah,
know, we went, had a big, well thought out day, spent a lot of money at all these different places, and his favorite part was
yeah,
just sitting with me watching something.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I
that's
think
there. There's just a lot in there, man. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I guess there's a couple things too. I think, and you can probably apply this to a lot of different aspects of your life, but um, I think you have to have vision for what you want your your family and your legacy to look like, and uh, and then kind of reverse engineer it almost. I mean, the same way that you would um, kind of go through like a goal setting. Um, I you'll probably resonate with this, and I'm not an expert by any means. So if I'm off, please correct me. But like, um, if you look at like a good marksman, I think they have primarily two things. One, they have a solid foundation, and two, they have vision. Right. So if you're um, when you're setting up to make an accurate or a consistently accurate shot, you're 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 unwavering in your stance and in your posture, and you can see your target. You can't hit it if you can't see it, right? So um, you've got to have that vision for what you want
That's
things
a
to look
solid
like.
analogy, man. Yeah,
and
solid,
then and then I
solid.
think you just keep reassessing as you move along, right? Like I think you need to, one of your priorities, again, I mentioned this earlier, but like knowing your kids, that seems really simple, but like you've got to spend time with your kids, and I think that needs to be a priority. um, it does so much for pouring into them and controlling what does go into them. um, yeah, and then you just, again, it kind of comes back to almost like goal setting a little bit. Like you're observing, you're learning as you go, and then you just readjust as needed, and you maintain that vision as you move along.
Yeah, yeah. It's when you talk about legacy vision, uh, for my I became a dad late in life. I'm 48. Gavin's 6, Freya's 4. So when they're around the age of 20, I'm going to be in my 60s. And I have a goal for that. I want to follow them on some sort of adventure trip of their choosing. So if they want to climb Kilimanjaro, if they want to hike the Appalachian Trail, if they want to go skydiving, I need to be ready to do that.
Mm,
And I can't wait till like 2, 3 months out, right? I've got to be
yeah,
maintaining it now, right? Which also helps me model it for them, right? Both my kids are consistently asking, at the end of the day when I'm tired, they're like, Dad, can we go work out in the gym? Sometimes I say yes. I try to say yes as much as possible there. Yeah. Which brings me to, I got two more questions for you. I think I'm going to have to split this into 2 episodes. Thank you for the time.
yeah, I love this.
Uh, if your kids were to describe you decades from now, what would
Ugh.
you want them to say? The great response, great initial
Yeah,
reaction right there.
I've actually, it's interesting because I've had some conversations about this with people in the past, and so um, admittedly, I have spent some time thinking about this. Um, I think there's a couple things. I think I would want them to describe me as a man who prayed often and feared God. I think we, again, you see that modeled in the New Testament through Jesus,
Hmm.
and that's really like a number one priority for me, right? Um, there's praying in secret, and then there's praying with my kids, and just praying with them. I mean, I think with my son, we prayed for some pretty basic stuff last night, and read Spider Man. Like it's just, but he's he's following that example, and it becomes part of our routine, and it's a normal thing that we do, and um, it's. I hope it's something that they remember me by. I think the other thing that kind of comes to mind is that I was somebody who did my best to never stay the same, um, and by that I mean somebody who is always seeking after Jesus, like with all my heart, and is surrendered to the point where I'm allowing the Holy Spirit to like transform who I was. Right. I have these conversations with my oldest daughter pretty often where because well most nights I try to be really intentional about um, organizing my schedule in a way where when we're putting them to bed I can have at least 2 or 3, maybe 5 or 10 minutes with each kid individually, and with my oldest who reads really proficiently, understands way more than I did when I was 9 or 10 years old. um, that's usually kind of our Bible study time and conversations about life that pour out of that. And so I think the Bible tells us to have the same attitude as Jesus, to walk as he walked. And so that's my prayer now, is just that he transforms who I am, that he teaches me, that he disciplines me, and that I'm moving in a direction where I'm a little bit more like Jesus every day. And I'm I am prayerful that my kids see that, and that's part of the legacy that they carry into their lives. And I mean, ultimately, it's also not just my legacy, right? It's the legacy that I received from my dad, from my grandfathers, from my father-in-law. You you have a short window of time to um, reinforce that in your kids, to put your own spin on it, um, maybe to
Yeah.
critique it in some areas, right? Like, I certainly don't want to, you know, pass on any like generational trauma, or mistreat my children and all. I was not mistreated as a child, but like, this is your opportunity for people who had pain or strongholds in their lives that were passed on, like those generational curses. I think maybe is probably the best term for that. Like,
Yeah. Right.
this is your opportunity to kind of rewrite the narrative for the next generation, and for everything that they're going to pass to their generation. And so, um, yeah.
Again, so many points you covered there. So you talked about, I can't remember exactly how you voiced it, but basically we're talking about a support system, right? I, I've said for probably a decade now, like when I talk to people, you don't have a support system. You're part of a support system,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So how do you feel like you've already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do you make sure your kids know how to curate a support system?
Well, I mean, the saying goes, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future." Right? I mean, that's one thing that I certainly want my kids to understand. And that does not change as we get older. It's more than essential to surround yourself with people, or in my case, men who are. My goal is men who are wiser than I am, right? And that can be in a lot of different aspects, right? But um,
It's a
it's
high bar, my man.
but it's men that you can look up to and emulate. It's men who can, and this could be women too, obviously, but men who can counsel you, who can guide you, mentors. Um, Ultimately, it's men who are trustworthy, and um, who will be there when you need them most, right? Like, I think we can go to the classic, like, iron sharpens iron, and that's true. But I think a little further than that, like, I think we have to be there for each other when times are really difficult, and it's supporting each other when we're too prideful to ask for help ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Especially as
Yeah,
men.
for sure.
Um, so I love this story, and again, I'm not an expert by any means, but I feel like I'm in the process of learning. But there's a story in Exodus, I believe it's chapter 17, where there's a battle that's going on between the Israelites and the Amalekites, and Moses is overlooking this battle. So he's standing up on a hill, and I can't remember if he was instructed, or he has the understanding that if he raises his hands with the staff of God, the Israelites start to prevail. And if he lowers his hands, they start to lose. And the story says, right in the middle of it, it says, "But Moses' hands were heavy." And so you can picture, like, I mean, even if you just hold your arms out with nothing in them, right? And you hold them there for a while, after a couple of minutes, like your shoulders really start to
They get
burn.
heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm imagining that, like, he knows I've got to keep my hands up this whole time, and he really starts to struggle. And he has two men up there with him, Aaron and Hur, and they stand on each side. Scripture says they stand on each side of him, and they each hold up a hand. And so they're there to support him when things get heavy. Like, they're there to help him get through, and then ultimately, like, the Israelites prevail. But, like, man, really practically, especially in the last few months, I've had that play out in my life. It's a long story short, and it's got a little bit of length to it, but maybe 8, 9 months ago, kind of really found myself at a point where, like, uh, really struggling with, like, just being in a depressed state, like really negative thoughts. Really felt like I was isolated, and there was a series of events and circumstances that, like, I had a lot of good acquaintances, but did not have a support system. Did not have, they say I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies, right? It didn't feel like I was in a position that, like,
I love that.
who do I call in this moment, right? Who can I really lean on? And more than that, who would reach out to me to check on me when they don't hear from me for a while, right? Um, and that started to really shape my prayer life, and um, very clearly and directly had answers to those prayers, um, to the point where, in at the end of May in 2025, I playing basketball with some buddies, just not there's no heyday to relive for me, but just trying to have fun and have community, and feed that competitive spirit a little bit. And just a freak accident, fell and broke my wrist, like just fell on it really weird. And went to the I didn't go to the ER that night. Went to the ortho the next morning, walked in with my arm in a splint, and said, "Hey, I need an x-ray." um, they x-rayed it, and they said, "Actually, you need a CT scan." Ended up multiple fractures, required surgery, plate and 7 screws. So 4 days later, I had surgery for the first time in my life. And um, every single person that helped was um, a friendship that had clearly either started or grown drastically in the 3 months prior to that. Um, every single one, like, um, people that watched our kids, people that um, brought food, a buddy that mowed the yard, like,
It's not an accident, man.
really simple stuff, but, like, just having that support, when you
And
had,
you were questioning whether or not it was there, right?
yeah, and it
That's
wasn't there. It was answered prayers in that 3 months prior. So it's, you have to have it. You
yeah,
have to.
you do. You do. 100%. Yeah. I think that's a great place to call it, Cody. You started that one with my grandfather used to say, "Show me your friends and I'll show you who you are." You said it a little bit differently, but like I heard his voice as soon as you
Yeah.
were saying that. I remember that. That's yeah. It is the support system is essential. And again, the thing I drive home, you don't have a support system, you're part of a support system.
Yeah.
Those people were there because you'd contributed to them
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form. So, uh, uh, I mean, that's going back to where we started, man. That's the thing I saw, the things I saw in you when we were first working together. Uh, it was impressive then, and man, you've grown so much as a man, husband, father. It, it just I'm honored
Yeah.
to still know you, man, to
Thank
be in
you.
touch. Thank you so much for making the time. Anything you want to say before we close out here?
Um, yeah, just I guess to piggyback off what we were just talking about, don't be isolated and um, seek Him first. Like it is the place to start, and it will absolutely change your life. So
Agreed, man. Yes,
yeah,
sir. Cody, thank you so
thank
much
you.
for the
Really
time,
appreciate it,
man.
man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This
Uh,
was great.
Thank you. This is the Protein and Purpose podcast. My man Cody Parks, episode 8.
Love it.
Thank you, sir.
We'll do it again. Thanks.
Yep.